In the quiet coastal town of Seabrook Point, where life moved slowly and reputations traveled fast, Adrian Cole lived the kind of teenage life many boys thought they wanted. Reckless, popular, untouchable. He was the kind of young man who seemed to glide across the surface of life without ever stopping long enough to feel the weight of anything. His friends worshipped him for his confidence, even when it crossed into arrogance. Teachers tolerated him because they assumed he'd eventually grow out of his attitude, and his father, a powerful local politician, rarely had the time or emotional energy to confront his son's downward slide. Everything changed the night Adrian's desire to impress his friends collided with reality. They'd dared a new kid at school to jump off a rusted factory platform into a shallow pond. A dangerous, pointless stunt, but the boy hesitated. To taunt him into doing it, Adrian climbed the platform himself, making a spectacle of his bravado. The crowd laughed, egging him on. The new boy finally attempted the jump but slipped, crashing awkwardly below. Panic erupted. Sirens came. Though the new kid survived, the blame fell squarely on Adrian. As punishment, the school principal ordered Adrian to spend his afternoons in community service, tutoring struggling students and helping with school events. His friends abandoned him almost immediately, irritated that the trouble had gone too far. For the first time in a long time, Adrian found himself alone, forced to be quiet, still, accountable. That was where Liana Hart entered his world. Liana was everything Adrian wasn't. The daughter of the town's pastor, she carried herself with a quiet, luminous strength that seemed out of place among teenagers still stumbling through their identities. She wore simple clothes, carried well-used books everywhere, and walked the hallways with the soft confidence of someone who didn't need approval to know who she was. Most students ignored her or labeled her strange. Not because she was unkind, she wasn't, but because she didn't fit into any of their categories. She wasn't rebellious. She wasn't trying to be popular. She wasn't chasing anyone or anything. She simply lived with purpose, and in high school, purpose often looked like awkwardness. Adrian noticed her during his first day of tutoring duty. She was helping a younger student with algebra, her face bent in concentration, her voice patient and warm. She smiled gently at him when their eyes met, but he looked away quickly. Embarrassed that she had seen him in what he considered a humiliating position. They interacted again when he was forced to help with the school's annual drama production. The director, an exhausted English teacher named Mrs. Whitman, was desperate for participants. To Adrian's frustration, his punishment included serving as an assistant on the production team. Liana, it turned out, was the lead actress. She had been chosen not because she was popular, far from it, but because she had a quiet, emotional presence that made her surprisingly compelling on stage. Adrian found himself watching her during rehearsals, mesmerized by how her soft voice filled the auditorium with unexpected warmth. She was, he realized, someone who meant every word she spoke, whether in life or on a script. Their worlds collided when Mrs. East Whitman announced that the male lead had transferred schools, leaving the production without its central character. After several desperate attempts to recruit someone else, she turned to Adrian. He refused. Everyone knew he was not an actor. But Mrs. Whitman had leverage, the power to increase or decrease the severity of his punishment. Within 24 hours, Adrian found himself holding a script, standing opposite Liana, trying to memorize lines he felt ridiculous saying. At first, they barely connected. Adrian stumbled over his lines, irritated at the entire situation. Liana, unfailingly patient, encouraged him softly but firmly, refusing to let him give up. She didn't criticize him in front of others. She didn't sigh or show disappointment. She simply believed, quietly, consistently, that he could do better. Slowly, he began to. During a break one afternoon, Liana approached him while he sat alone behind the stage, staring at the script with slumped shoulders. She sat beside him, folded her hands in her lap, and asked, "Why do you run from things that require heart?" No one had ever spoken to Adrian that way. Not with judgment, but with clarity. He didn't know how to respond. She smiled, her eyes searching his. "You have potential. You just don't want to admit it." Something in her calmness disarmed him. He didn't lash out. He didn't retreat. Instead, he asked her how she learned to be so sure of things. Her answer shaped everything that followed. I walk with purpose, even if others don't understand it. From that moment on, Adrian found himself drawn to her, not in a superficial way, but with genuine curiosity. He began showing up early to rehearsals, practicing on his own, and even helping clean up afterwards. Liana noticed, but she didn't praise him excessively. She simply treated him with respect, as though she had expected him to rise to the challenge all along. Their bond deepened. He walked her home one evening after rehearsal, discovering that her life was nothing like his. Her house was modest, cozy, filled with books, photographs, and soft music. Her father, Pastor Hart, greeted Adrian with cautious politeness, watching him closely. Adrian felt exposed under the man's steady gaze, realizing he'd never earned the respect of an adult who truly cared about their child's well-being. Liana escorted him to the porch and said gently, "Don't take it personally. My father protects what he loves." Adrian thought about that for days. As rehearsals continued, he realized something else. Liana carried secrets behind her serene eyes. Sometimes she paused mid-conversation, inhaling with a subtle tremor. Sometimes she looked at sunsets as though she were memorizing them. Sometimes she grew so quiet that the world around her seemed to pulse with unspoken meaning. Then came the night of the school play. The auditorium filled with parents, students, and teachers. Adrian, nervous, despite weeks of practice, scanned the crowd and saw his father sitting stiffly in the third row, checking his watch. But when he looked to Liana waiting backstage, he felt a strange peace settle over him. The performance began. Adrian surprised everyone, including himself, by delivering a sincere, emotional portrayal. His voice, steady and vulnerable, captured the room. And then came the final scene, the one where his character had to profess his love to hers. He looked at Liana under the warm glow of the stage lights. Her eyes glistened. For a moment, he forgot the audience, forgot the script, forgot the punishment that had brought him there. All he saw was her, steady, luminous, quietly extraordinary. "I will always be with you," he whispered, a line from the play but suddenly filled with personal truth. The audience erupted with applause. After the show, students and parents congratulated them, but Adrian's focus was solely on Liana. For the first time, he knew he was falling in love, deeply, sincerely, irrevocably. Days turned into weeks, and their connection grew. They went on slow walks through town. They talked about dreams, fears, hopes. Liana revealed the simple ambitions she still held: a desire to experience true love, to help others, to leave a legacy of kindness. Adrian opened up about his strained relationship with his father, his anger at feeling invisible, his fear that he'd never become the kind of man worth respecting. Then, one evening, everything changed. Liana told him the truth. She was sick, terminally sick, and there was nothing medicine could do. Adrian stared at her, disbelief crashing through him like a tidal wave. She had seemed timeless, unbreakable, filled with quiet strength. The idea of losing her felt impossible, but she explained everything: her diagnosis, the reason she rarely spoke about the future, the reason she lived with such intentionality. She didn't want pity. She didn't want to be saved. She only wanted to live meaningfully with whatever time she had left. Adrian broke down. He felt powerless, angry, devastated. But Liana simply held his hands and whispered, "Love doesn't avoid pain. It transforms it." From that night onward, Adrian devoted himself to her happiness. He fulfilled everything on her small but heartfelt list of dreams: dancing under the stars, watching meteor showers, visiting her childhood favorite places, and capturing moments that made her smile despite the shadows closing in. He became part of her family. Pastor Hart, initially distrustful, grew to respect him deeply, seeing the sincerity in the young man's devotion. Adrian's own father began attempting to bridge the gap between them, moved by the transformation in his son. As Liana's condition worsened, Adrian refused to leave her side. She often reassured him, comforting him when he should have been comforting her. She held on to hope, not the hope of a cure, but the hope that love had already fulfilled its purpose in her life. One evening, as she lay wrapped in blankets on her porch, watching the sun dip below the horizon, Adrian asked her the question he had been wrestling with. "Do you regret anything?" She smiled, the soft, glowing smile that had changed his life. "Not a single moment," she whispered, "because loving you has been enough." Adrian proposed to her days later, overwhelmed with the longing to honor her, to celebrate her, to make whatever time they had feel infinite. She accepted with happy tears. Their wedding was small but filled with warmth, candles glowing, soft music playing, friends and family gathered with hearts full of tenderness. Liana walked down the aisle with quiet dignity, radiant in her simplicity. Adrian felt as though the universe held its breath while she approached him. When they exchanged vows, he whispered words only she could fully understand. Promises not of forever, but of presence, devotion, and gratitude. They lived their short married life with gentle joy, reading together, watching the ocean, speaking softly in the quiet hours. And when the time came, she left the world as she had lived, peacefully, purposefully, wrapped in love. Adrian grieved, deeply and painfully. But he also changed. He pursued college, rebuilt his relationship with his father, volunteered in the community, and eventually became a mentor to troubled youth. Every act of kindness, every meaningful step he took, he carried the memory of Liana with him. Years later, he walked through Seabrook Point and saw the places they had shared. The theater stage, the quiet streets, the ocean horizon, and understood something he hadn't grasped in his youth. She had saved him, not by force, not by sacrifice, but simply by loving him with sincerity and teaching him what it meant to walk with purpose. And he carried her in every step he took,